One of the most powerful ways that we can change our life, improve our life, put our life on a different track toward a different future is to learn to cultivate a new empowering belief. And that is what we discuss in this video. So enjoy. A belief can grow. I think I even see this in my book, as a matter of fact. I say a belief is a tree that grows in the mind. Now that's a weird sentence, you know. I don't expect too many people will read that sentence and understand what I'm trying to convey. But the way I look at it, a belief has a structure to it like a tree. It's got different branches, right? So, for example, that what we just talked about, or what I just talked about in terms of growing a belief, right? So, if I want to feel loved, if I want to believe that I'm lovable, you know, then I need to be able to believe that I'm loved. Well, my mind is going to go, prove it. Give me an example, right? So the first thing I think of is, oh, my dog loves me. Oh, okay, right? That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's true. So there's one branch, right? And I might think, well, my wife loves me. There's another branch, you know. And I have other people that I know that love me. You know, I might even say Jesus loves me. A lot of people say that, right? If you believe that, then that's fine, you know. So that's what I mean about it has branches. So the way that I see it, a belief is a structure in your consciousness. I'm I'm pretty sure, I am sure, I would say, at least I believe, let me say this, I believe that it's a structure of neurons in your brain. I mean, if you could follow it, you'd be able to follow it, kind of like a what they call a neural network, right? Much like a tree. So that's why it can grow. It can be cultivated and it can be strengthened and it can become one of the more dominant beliefs in your entire life, right? And the way Anthony Robbins talks about it, he says, think of it like a table, you know, like a belief is like a table. If it only has one leg, it's not very strong. It's going to fall over. If it's got two legs, it's not very strong either. You got three legs, oh, okay, now it's pretty strong. You put four legs, five legs, six legs, 10 legs, now it's really solid. It's not going to go anywhere, right? That belief is really strong. So if you've got like 10 examples of why you are loved, which again is what you do in your workbook, right? You spend a minute or two in your workbook and you say, okay, why do I feel loved? Well, because of the dog and my wife and my grandchildren and, you know, whatever. Well, pretty soon what's going to happen is that feeling of I am loved and feeling loved, it's a feeling. So we want to make sure that we feel it. It's not just an idea, but it's a feeling too. So you want to feel loved. So you write those little examples down, and you meditate, you think about it, you cultivate the belief, right? It grows. You do that for 3 months, you're going to feel loved, which is going to change your personality. So your personality is going to shift, right? Um, I believe I've talked about this before. I don't expect Yvette has heard it, but I think I talked about it in at least one or maybe more of these videos. The story of the bus driver. Do you remember that story, Greg?
No.
Oh, the bus driver that you ran into that liked you, or that you were saying when you were living early as a young man that you decided you had friends. Is that which one you're talking about? Or people liked you and that things were going good and he was pleasant to you? Is
What it
that the one you're talking
was
about?
I was cultivating feeling loved, and I did that for about a month, as I just described, right?
Mhm.
My cat, my dog, whatever, my parents. So over a period of about a month, because of neuroplasticity, it grows. You get more neural connections, right? Here comes Phil.
Can I clarify something on that real quick?
Yep.
So within the acronym of MAGIC, you've got motivation, you got attitude. Attitude in your book, you said, is based on your beliefs in part, right? So it's a subset of like attitude with your beliefs. You could have good attitudes
Hey,
or
Phil.
bad attitudes. Hey, Phil.
An
But
attitude is a way of looking at something.
right. But you get that from in part from your beliefs, right? So if you have a bad attitude it doesn't motivate you, let's say you're angry about everything, you're probably not going to do a lot, or unless anger motivates you. But that would be like a filter that you use on everything, right? It's like the glasses that you would look at, rose-colored glasses, or a negative attitude would be everything's dark and bleak, right? But you can control your attitude by monitoring your beliefs, right? You were trying to change your belief. I think you said as a young man you had a bad attitude kind of about
Well, to
life,
me, an
right?
attitude, to me, an attitude and a belief are the same,
Okay.
except that a belief is much stronger. So again, I look at it like a tree, you know. So, for example, I can change an attitude the way I can change the way I look at something, right? I think I talk in the book. I use this example in the book. If you're walking past an orchard or you're driving past an orchard, what's going to happen is the way that orchard appears to you is going to change every second, right? You know, you're driving past or you're walking past an orchard, and let's assume that the orchard is all planted in rows, right? Kind of like a grid, you know. If you were in a helicopter looking down at it, you'd see these rows and rows of trees, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you're walking past it, then you're going to see at a certain point, you're going to look and you're going to be able to see, oh, there's the row of trees and there's a space between this row and the next row, right? So to me, that's an attitude.
Okay.
That means this is how you're looking at it, right? Now, if you keep on walking, you walk another 10 feet, and that you can't see that row of trees anymore. It's just a jumble of like a hodgepodge of trees, right? But if you keep
Right.
walking, then at a certain point you're going to look and you're going to be able to say, "Oh, hey, I can see there's another kind of a diagonal here. All these diagonals line up now, right?" And that may
Right.
happen 3, 4, 5 times as you're walking or driving past this field, right? So to
Mm-hmm.
me, that's how I think about an attitude. An attitude is the way you look at something. And so the way you look at this orchard, for example, if you're standing in a position where you can't see any rows, then your belief or your meaning, you know, the way you look at it might be, oh, these trees are all mixed up. There's no arrangement that I can see, right?
So you're confused. You're kind of
It's
confused
all
when you look at
confused. It's just it's chaos, right?
it. Mm-hmm.
But then you walk a little bit farther and you go, oh, hey, now I see how these things line up, right?
Mm.
So you have a perception there, or an understanding, could be, or an attitude that says, oh, I understand this, right? And then you walk a little farther and you go, oh, here's another, I can see another diagonal here, right? So then you have all these different attitudes. Now you might put those together into a belief that says, oh, these trees are all arranged in a very specific organization that I didn't realize before, but now I realize. And from different positions in the field, I can spot different rows. Some of them are diagonal, some of them are vertical, some of them are horizontal, right?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, an attitude is like a point of view. It can change, and sometimes you can change your attitude just in a second. You know, like for example, if I'm looking at this thing here, this is my glass case, right? Well, if I look at
Right.
it from this side, it looks kind of like it's almost square, right? Not really,
Mm-hmm.
because it's got flat in the bottom and rounded on the top. It looks a bit like an Oreo cookie, or not an Oreo, but you know those chocolate covered
Oh yeah,
sandwiches, marshmallow covered things.
marshmallows or
It
something
looks
like
a
that.
bit
Yeah.
like that, right? You might say, "Oh, he's holding one of those marshmallow cookies in his hand," right? But then if you
Right.
change your attitude, it's like, "Oh, wait a second, it's not one of those. It's something else. It's a little coffin." You know, looks like
That's
a
an
coffin,
eclair.
right? So
Good for
yeah,
Dunkin' Donuts.
so your attitude is the way you see something, and um, and it can change in a second or two, possibly, right? And the but your attitudes, at least to my way of thinking, they seem to be kind of collected, the same as the branches of a tree are collected. They have certain they have certain, like I have an attitude about school, let's say, and that attitude is made up of my attitude about education, my attitude about learning, my attitude about teachers, my attitude about students. I have a lot of different attitudes that might be under that umbrella of, school, right?
Hmm.
So a belief to me is an attitude, or maybe a collection of attitudes that become kind of ossified, right? You know
Okay.
that word ossified?
Yep.
Like a tree, I mean, I have a tree outside my yard here, and when a branch first grows on that tree, it's really supple. I can twist it and I can bend it. I could probably take it and tie a knot in it, right? At a certain point, because they're green, they're young shoots, right? But if I keep that knot in that branch, eventually it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and it's going to get to the point maybe where it's like 2 inches thick after maybe 5 years or 10 years, right? Well, I'm
Hmm.
not going to be able to untie that branch now. It's solid, right? Like a bonsai tree kind of a thing, where you cultivate the shapes of these different branches, and then they become ossified. They become fixed, right? So to me, a
Yep.
belief is fixed. That's how I think about it.
Got it.
So a belief
Okay.
is like,
And then it can become petrified, and then you're really committed to whatever it is.
that's right. Then you're buried in the ground, right? Now that's the way I look at it. An attitude and a belief. So, for example,
Interesting.
that MAGIC, the attitude section,
Hmm.
to me that covers beliefs too. It's like attitude or belief. And I think I
Okay.
say that. I think I say that in
You
the book.
do.
I certainly say it in the ABC book because I remember that. I think that story is in the ABC book, which was the first book I ever wrote. Which I just republished, right?
Yeah.
Um,
Could there be another distinction here between the two concepts? The attitudes are a bit more unconscious, and whereas the belief is something, you could ask somebody a question, what do you believe about this, or what do you believe about that? It's a little more tangible, a little more, even, the person's aware of, whereas their attitudes is sort of like, the water they swim in, it's like,
Hmm.
they're not really that aware. It's more of it's an emotion. It's a way, it's a sort of a way of being around stuff.
I
Good
don't know.
point.
I mean, if you want to think of it that way, that's fine. To me, they're
I like
both
that, Bill.
unconscious. To me, they're both unconscious. Or at least, I have this term that I've used before uh, because the idea that something is conscious or unconscious, to me, I had an apple a little while ago and I got a piece of the apple floating around my mouth. I can't get rid of it, so I'll just pick it out here. Um, the So we have the conscious and the subconscious, right? And you sort of see this drawing sometimes of like an iceberg floating in the ocean, right? I've seen that many times, and it's like, oh, one tenth of it is above the ocean, and 9/10 are below the ocean, right?
Hmm.
And so people say, well, that's like the conscious and the subconscious. So your conscious mind is the part that's above the water, and the unconscious is the part that's below the water, right? But to me, there's another zone, and that is what I call the subliminal zone, right? So liminal means limit or line, right? Phil, do you know Yvette? You've met Yvette before?
I
Yeah,
really,
we met before.
Yeah,
He
I've
might
been
be
on the
one
same
of the
call.
meetings.
We didn't really
Yeah.
say hi.
Hi, Phil.
Sorry,
Um,
I'm late. I came back from my morning run.
yeah, better late than never. You know, you can show up
That's
anytime.
right. That's right.
Good job, Phil.
Yeah,
Yeah, good for
I'm
you.
yeah, I'm building up. I did eight 400-meter laps here this morning.
Oh,
Good for
wow.
you.
I'm building up to being able to do 25 by April 21st when I do the Vancouver Sun Run.
Fantastic. Well, good for you,
Wow,
man. That's
that's
great. That's
Yeah,
that's
good
yeah.
job.
admirable. Um,
It's a
so
long
yeah,
way.
so the subliminal zone is basically the part that's where the water line is, right? You can kind of see it. You can see a certain way down there. So what I mean by subliminal zone is it's something that you're not completely conscious of. It's more or less unconscious, but you can get to it pretty easily, right? Like if I say to you, you know, what do you think? Do you like dogs? Well, that may be something that you haven't thought about, but as soon as I ask a question, right away you're aware of it, right? You have an attitude about dogs. Oh, I love dogs, or I hate dogs, or dogs are fun, or we always have dogs, or we never have dogs, you know, whatever it might be. So that's the subliminal zone, right? It's like, it's normally not something that you focus on, but you can access it really easily, right? Whereas the unconscious or the subconscious is something that's maybe it's inaccessible, right? Or it's deeper down. It's more difficult to access. You might be able to access it if you're hypnotized or something like that, or maybe meditation or something like that.
Oh, affirmations, right? Isn't that you use affirmations too?
Affirmations too, yeah. Affirmations sometimes will bring it out, So you can get pretty deep into your unconscious by various techniques, right? So yeah, so that's how I look at it. Is a belief is like a stronger thing than an attitude. An attitude is a little more flexible, right? Now, the way Anthony
Okay.
Robbins describes it, like I mentioned, the table with all the legs, right? An attitude, using that model, might have 3 or 4 legs to it, and a belief might have 20 legs. But a belief is also, it's highly emotional, right? It's normally tied right into your body. So a belief is sort of more solid. But that's how I look at it. I mean, that's the only. Like I say, Anthony Robbins defines a belief as a feeling of certainty about the meaning of something. So if you can identify, like I talked a minute ago about school and education, if somebody said, teachers are terrible people, they're always abusing kids. I say, well, really? You believe that? I mean, give me an example, So that's going to color more of your reality, your belief, than an attitude. An attitude is a more flexible, perhaps, not as set in stone, right? So anyway, yeah. So the idea then is you can cultivate a belief. So I was cultivating the belief that I think I had an affirmation, and the affirmation was, I see love all around me, something like that. I feel love all around me. Because at the time, I didn't have any relationships. I was a lonely guy, right? By the way, have you ever seen that movie, The Lonely Guy? You got to
No.
watch it. You got to watch it. I can't remember who the stars are, but it's a must. It's one of these must-watch movies. It's as funny as the Dirty Rotten Scoundrels.
Oh,
It's that funny, right? I mean, it's hilarious. I think it's called The Lonely Guy. I think it's
Who's in there? Is Michael Caine in there?
no, I think it's Steve Martin.
yeah.
Steve
Or it could
Martin.
be Jim. Or it could be Jim Carrey.
I think it's
No,
Carrie, maybe.
no, it's
Hmm?
let's see, The Lonely Guy. I'm pretty sure that's what it's called.
Yeah, Steve Martin did. Yeah.
By the way, Yvette, while you were gone, I gave you a great little treatise on how to find a job. Well, she's gone again, so maybe. Okay, never mind.
Steve Martin, Charles Grodin.
Oh.
It's so funny, man. It's so funny. Anyway,
Mm.
so I was the lonely guy, right? I was the lonely guy. Like I had no relationships. I was fairly new in Vancouver. I didn't have a job, and I was in between opportunities, in between relationships. And so I decided that I wanted. So the affirmation, I believe, was my life is filled with loving relationships.
Rodin from Midnight Run. Okay.
So, yeah, Charles Grodin was in Midnight Run.
Yep.
So I think that's the affirmation. My life is filled with loving relationships. That's what I. So I was meditating on that, thinking about it, for about a month. And of course, it was untrue because I didn't know anybody. Like I thought, hey, wait, I don't have any friends. I don't have any girlfriends. Nobody's banging on my door trying to make love to me. So, but I thought, well, that's the attitude. That's the position I'm going to take. I'm going to adopt that attitude. I'm going to look for evidence that it's true, which is the affirmation principle, right? Looking for evidence that it's true. And so anyway, one day I was waiting for a bus, had to go downtown, so I'm standing on the bus stop, and the bus pulls over. The guy opens the door, says hi. I say hi, put my ticket in the bus, go sit down, and then I go downtown, and I ring the bell. The guy pulls over to the side of the road, opens the door, lets me out, says, "Have a good night." I say, "Okay." So I'm standing outside the bus at the bus stop. The bus drives away, and I go, "Hey, that was a loving relationship. That relationship I had with that bus driver, that was a loving relationship." Now, why was it loving? Well, what's love? Well, love is positive energy, good energy. The guy was nice, he was polite, he was pleasant to me, he did exactly what I wanted. I flagged him down, he pulled over and stopped, opened the door, waited until I got into my seat, drove downtown. I told him where I wanted to get off, he pulled over, let me off. That was a loving relationship. Now, that was a transformational moment for me because I realized, hey, I was thinking about I want a girlfriend, not a bus ride downtown. That was what I was thinking of when I said my life is full of loving relationships, right? But I thought, hey, this is a loving relationship. This is perfect. I mean, this only lasted for 10 minutes, but that was a loving relationship. So that was my first clue. Hey, relationships, they come and they go. Like I may never see
Interesting.
that. I may never see that bus driver again. But while I was on the bus, I was experiencing the benefit of a loving relationship. I mean, let's face it. The guy could have given me the finger and driven past and not stopped and let me on the bus if he wanted to, but he didn't. He was nice. So then the same thing happened in a restaurant. I went in a restaurant to have a meal, and I realized the waitress came over, smiled at me, gave me the menu, brought me a coffee, gave me the food. You know, I thought, hey, there's another loving relationship, right? So this happened over the course of, a matter of a week or two, and I realized finally, hey, I got loving relationships with everybody in Vancouver. I have a loving relationship with everybody in Canada and everybody in the world. Well, that was a huge transformation from like a few weeks before when I was like the lonely guy who didn't have any love in his life. Suddenly now I got loving relationships with everybody. So that was huge, right? Now there's an example of how you can cultivate a belief. Literally cultivate it. And you find examples of it, and pretty soon you see more and more examples, and then it becomes a reality for you, right? So the way I think
That's
about it
interesting.
now, the way I think about it now,
Well,
my,
I always say like
I mean,
gratitude is an attitude, right?
my life right
Grat-
now is chock-a-block with loving relationships. That's a fact. That's my reality. Well, back when I did this exercise, which was in the 70s, um, it was absolutely untrue. I just didn't see what I see now. And of course, it didn't mean that either. The meaning changed. I never considered having a bus ride. I never considered the relationship being a loving relationship with the bus driver. That was a new idea. Sorry, Greg, I cut you off there, but I just wanted to finish that
Well,
thought.
I was going to say, it's interesting. You're finding happiness by growing an attitude. Like they say, gratitude is an attitude. People say, well, you can fight depression, you can fight a lot of things by being grateful. But they say, well, what do? You made a gratitude list, right? So you sit down, you start making a gratitude list. I said, I've got a home, I've got a car, I've got friends, I've got, savings, I've got a credit card, okay, I've got a dog, whatever you've got. And by focusing on that every day, you're growing that tree branch that you're talking about. You're saying an attitude is like a tree growing.
Yeah,
Well, you're growing it by
you're growing that
your
mental
awareness,
structure.
which you could say that gratitude is a big source of happiness.
Absolutely.
Well, you're doing the same thing with love. You're saying, well, I want love, right? Well, you defined it originally, you wanted a loving romantic relationship, but you expanded it by saying, wait a minute, I'll take love where I can get it, right? You want the feeling of love, which there's a lot of different types of love. There's agape, there's all kinds of there's 32 words for love, right? So there's other types of love, which you can find if you're looking for them. So now you've grown this tree around love, that you say, I do have love. I had a need for it. I had a want for it, and now I have it, right? Just by changing the way you're looking, you say, I see it, the diagonal grapevine trees. You're going along, you see the road, now you're walking, you're confused. I'm not finding anything. They say, wait a minute, it's over this way too.
Right.
Right? And so now you're no longer confused. You've created a belief that it says, I can find love here and I can find love here. Right? And then here, so you're creating this feeling of happiness for yourself. Okay, now I've got gratitude, happiness, I've got love, happiness.
So basically, cultivation, right? You can cultivate a belief, or you can cultivate a feeling, and this is what I was doing with this idea of loving relationships. Now, I could talk for a whole day on the changes that happened in my life as a result of doing that. You watch the movie The Lonely Guy, which I would highly recommend because it's funny as hell. But those guys were so desperate to have a date that if any woman ever showed them any attention, they would go nuts. They'd fawn all over this woman and break out into sweat, and so the woman would run away, right? Well, I was kind of like that too. Like I was so, lonely and desperate and whatever. And so I decided I'm going to turn it around. So my life is full of loving relationships. So when my life became full of loving relationships, which, as I say, took about 30 days or maybe 60 days, and then of course it got better and better over time. Then if I was at a party or something and I met somebody, a potential date or a potential girlfriend or something, then I didn't go nuts, because I wasn't so like desperate. I wasn't like a thirsty man in the desert that would kill somebody for a glass of water. So a lot of my life shifted just because of that one thing. And of course, that was the beginning for me, I think, of learning, proving to myself that I could cultivate a belief, cultivate an attitude, and how that changed me, right? And of course, I was aware of neuroplasticity, so I realized that's what's happening is my brain is shifting, right? It wasn't called neuroplasticity then because it wasn't discovered yet. This was back in the 70s, but I knew about neuroplasticity because I'd read about it in some metaphysical books that I was reading, like The Science of Getting Rich, for example, by Wallace Wattles, written in 1910. He talks about neuroplasticity. He doesn't call it that because they didn't know that word then. He called it something else. He said the neurons in your brain will change when you do these exercises, these thought exercises. So, so long answer there, Yvette, but about a belief, cultivating a belief. So you change your point of view, even if you don't believe it, you don't have to believe it. But if it works for you, if it makes you feel better, then just reinforce it, think about it, meditate on it, give other examples of it. Pretty soon, it becomes permanent, and then it's like, now I have a different experience, a different experience of it. Right?
Okay, those are really great advice. Oh, thank you for taking the time to help me.
Well, that's why we're here. That's why we're here. For more information about this online community, to get your own copy of the book upon which this entire training series is based, either the ebook, the paperback, or the audiobook, go to mindtimeandpower.com, where you can also get a free copy of this Design Your Life workbook.